Thank you for letting me come. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Bitcoins. Are there any experts in the room? No. Okay, that's good because this is going to be a Bitcoin 101. So it's going to be a short introduction to Bitcoin. I called up one of my friends who's also working at the Bitcoin exchange and told him, okay, I need to explain Bitcoin in 20 minutes, and he just said, yeah, good luck. So we're gonna run through it quickly. And also Stephanie asked me to just talk briefly about how I got interested in Bitcoin, because I was actually I did a master's degree in finance, and I used to work in a bank. So I had this really boring job where I worked 100 hours a week and hated my life, and like most people actually do in banks, but everyone is afraid of saying it. And I kind of got into this whole financial work, and got really interested in how banks actually work. And I found out that most banks, they don't give a shit. They pretty much only care about themselves and how they can optimize their own value or own profit, which I found a little bit frustrating because we live in a society where there's so many people who actually need a bank and needs to be bankable. And if you go, for example, to Somalia, there's no banks in Somalia. All American banks are afraid of going into Somalia because of piracy. So it's practically impossible for them to go to the bank, withdraw money from their families in the States or in Europe and everything. And that's a horrible thing because you can never get a society out of poverty or out of piracy if you can't help them monetarily, or if their families can't send money back to their families in Somalia. So the first time I actually heard about Bitcoin was because Bitcoin solved this problem. People were sending Bitcoins to their families in Somalia, so their families in Somalia could actually withdraw money in their local Bitcoin exchanges around the corner, and then they could spend money that was sent from the US without paying like a 20% exchange fee or forex fee. So I actually found that really interesting and beneficial for society. So what is Bitcoin? I started out and said, okay, I really need to understand Bitcoin. I really need to figure out what is this thing everybody is talking about. And I did that around like 3 years ago, where I think there were maybe only 50 people in Copenhagen who knew what Bitcoin was. So it was not easy, but they all told me, yeah, it's really difficult to understand Bitcoin and everything. But I said I need to understand it. And back then you couldn't Google Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? There was a lot of articles about it, but you couldn't really Google it. Today you can actually Google it, and the explanation I think is quite good. So it's a digital currency used to make payments of any value without fees. It runs on blockchain, a decentralized ledger kept running by miners whose powerful computers crunch transactions, and they are rewarded in Bitcoins. It actually says everything if you understand it, but let's try to break it up later. I spent maybe 3 months where I sat every evening and studied Bitcoin and tried to understand it. And of course I didn't know anything to start with. And then after 3 months I became an expert in game theory economics and applied cryptographies. And then the more I actually studied, the more I saw that that was only the tip of the iceberg, and I found out, okay, I don't know shit. So that was kind of irritating, and this is actually still where I am. Bitcoin is just, and blockchain in general is just, it's a matter of how deep the rabbit hole goes. It's the technical aspects of itself in itself is not that that interesting, but the whole philosophy about blockchain and Bitcoin and where it can take our society is insanely interesting. And also most people, even the cleverest people I know, they really don't understand why Bitcoin has the price it has, why people are using it, what it's used for and everything. But we are getting smarter. So that's at least a comfort. But let's try to break it up. Said before that that is a virtual currency that runs on blockchain, and blockchain is the ledger. So what is a ledger? Well, actually, you all know, or probably not, but our grandparents, when they withdrew money in their bank, they went down to the local sparkasse or the local bank, and said that they needed to either put in some money or withdraw some money. And the old bank clerk took up the bank's ledger and wrote in their name and how much money they have in their savings and how much money they withdrawed or put in their savings. And blockchain is pretty much like that. It's a book that the bank has access to, or in blockchain terms, it's actually everyone, the society, has access to this book. That means that everyone can download the whole blockchain. So everyone can download the bank ledger, in other words. And that is, I think, a couple of gigabytes only, where you have access to all the historical transaction and blockchains that's ever been done, which is really interesting, because that means that you can't do any fraud, really. You can't cheat, because it's noted down in the blockchain. Even errors are written down in the blockchain, and everyone has to confirm that this is a real transaction. And that is actually what the miners are doing. The miners are just supercomputers who are sitting and crunching that, okay, we agree that this transaction is true and it fits into the blockchain. And that cannot be broken. That's why it's called cryptography. Today there's no computer who can cheat this code. Maybe if we get a quantum computer or something like that one day, then we'll be able to cheat it, but not before that. So I hope that simplified what the blockchain is a little bit. But then we still have, what the fuck is Bitcoins, right? And actually Bitcoin was invented hundreds, thousands of years ago on a little island called Yap Island, which is in the Palau area, just south of Philippines. And in Yap Island, they actually came up with a brilliant system of monetizing the society. Stones. So they made something called rejstones, or stone money. And these came in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. And the brilliant thing about this is that it was built on a set of rules. And Bitcoin is exactly the same. Bitcoin is just something. It's a digital currency. It's digital gold. But the real value in Bitcoin is that it's built on a set of rules that makes it valuable, or it does that you cannot cheat it and gives it some intrinsic value. And these rules are that you cannot mine more Bitcoins than there is. There's only 21 million Bitcoins. There's never going to be any more. And once you mine them all, then it's just a matter of the price is going to rise. Same with these guys. They mined these stones, which was a very special stone, which only could be mined in a quarry in Palau, 400 kilometers away. So they actually sailed these huge stones in canoes to this small island and transported them around. But they found out that, okay, this is too difficult to transport all these stones around. So they they actually ended up making a rule that that it's what did they call it? They called it like the oral history of ownership. So that means that if you had a house where you had a couple of stones outside the house, some of these stones might belong to someone else. But because you had the oral history about this is the stone where my daughter was married together with the chief of the other village, then everybody knew, well, this is the stone that belongs to him. So you didn't have to move them around. And this is pretty much the same with Bitcoin. You don't have to move Bitcoin around in a sense. Everybody agrees that now this kind of this Bitcoin or this part of the code belongs to this guy, and it can be controlled in the ledger. So that was my explanation of Bitcoin. There's probably a lot of different explanations out there, but I hope it makes sense. When was Bitcoin created? Well, it was created with the cyberpunk movement in the 90s, actually. And these were really anarchistic and anarchistic philosophers who were very much against the whole society and government and liberal structure back then, and the banking infrastructure. And they sat and discussed in forums why do we don't like the society, pretty much, or the way banks work. And there's been a lot of attempts on actually creating a Bitcoin-ish system before. One of them is PayPal, and they're probably the only ones who succeeded, but also went pretty commercial. So in 2008, there was this anonymous person or group, we don't know. It might be a couple of these cyberpunks who actually went together, and they created a pseudonym called Satoshi Nakamoto. And they published a white paper in November 2008. And I think that 2008 was perfect timing for this, because a lot of people had tried this. But in 2008, we just had a financial crisis. The confidence in the trust in the whole banking infrastructure and the government were very low. So people were actually thinking about, well, is there another way to do this? And this is what this paper actually highlighted, and it was called Bitcoin. Then in January 2009, the first Bitcoin block was mined, which is called the Genesis block. And if you're really nerdy, you can go in and look at the Genesis block, which is a long phrase of letters and numbers. So probably not that interesting. But until 2010, not a lot of stuff happened with these Bitcoins. We had a lot of IT developers who were building on the Bitcoin infrastructure, and they shared the Bitcoins together with each other and sat probably playing Counter-Strike or something like that, and said, oh yeah, by the way, do you want a couple of 1,000 Bitcoins? And there wasn't really any value to Bitcoins. But then in 2010, this guy, Laszlo Heinrich, okay, my pronunciation is not that good, but he bought a pizza for 10,000 Bitcoins from his local Papa John's. And I don't know if he's really sorry today, or if he's actually glad that he started this, because in today's cost, this would be 60 million US dollars. So it's probably the most expensive pizza ever. But it showed that you could use this digital currency to actually get something that has value in real life, and a lot of stuff happened after that. We started to see that you could actually buy things with Bitcoin, and you could go and buy coffee and a lot of other stuff. And I don't know if anyone have heard about Silk Road. Does that name ring any bells to anyone? Yep. So Silk Road is the place where you buy drugs and assassinations and everything. So I don't know why you know about that name. Silk Road was obviously created because you couldn't really track the identity with Bitcoins, and it was a currency that you could pay with. So it was perfect for the dark market or the dark web, and it's actually quite funny. Silk Road was closed down in 2013, but a lot of new pages were opened up who offered the same, and you can still go in today if anybody of you wants to buy drugs. You can go in and you can buy some Bitcoins, and then you can order some drugs. And we actually, I was actually working for another Bitcoin company called Chain Analysis, who sells fraud detection software for banks. And the first thing they do when they go into the boardroom and present to the bank that they need this software is to go in and download the Tor browser on their own computer and then buy drugs and then say, okay, you really need fraud detection software because everybody can do this, even on your own computers. So now it's getting more, there's more systems that can actually track Bitcoin, and the myth about Bitcoin being totally untraceable is not true. You can track everything you want. And also, it makes sense because you have the ledger. So you have all recordings and all transactions are recorded. So the guys who did, for example, the WannaCrypt ransomware, I don't know if you've heard about it, and also the guys who laid down Maersk terminals and all the computer systems and said that they wanted a ransom in Bitcoins in order to open up the computers. They were traced immediately, so they didn't get anything out of it. So today, if you're gonna buy drugs, maybe go to Christiania instead of Silk Road. It's actually probably more safe. So that also means that Bitcoin is becoming more mature. Even though I would say it's still in the development phase and testing phase, Bitcoin is still becoming more mature, and that leaves us in another situation, because now we have something called initial coin offerings, and I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's practically just a way of raising money. So instead of going out to investors and say I want dollars or DKK, you go out and say I would like Bitcoins, or I would like Ether, or whatever digital currency, and then they try to sell all different kind of stuff by raising this, and a lot of these are actually just scams that is ripping people off, because everybody's interested in Bitcoin and thinks that as long as it has something to do with cryptocurrency, then it sounds really interesting and you can make a lot of money on it. But some people are also making money, and it's not always you. But of course, with these things, it's always only 10% who ruins it for everybody. But Jordan Belfort, who was actually the original Wolf of Wall Street, he went out in an article last week in Financial Times and said that it's the biggest scam ever, and it's far worse than anything he has been doing. So I actually agree. If we look at the rate of Bitcoin now, it's in $6,000, which is insane. Nobody really understands why. It was in $3,000 in September, 1.5 months ago, and now it's in $6,000, and that is just such a huge amount. It's Bitcoin is in some sense actually the biggest startup ever. It's bigger than Apple. Even when you think about the market cap of Bitcoin. So where this will go, whether it will go to $100,000 or $1 million, we don't know. Of course, if everybody in the world wants a Bitcoin, then the price will be $1 million or even more. But it might also just be like a bubble and a scam, because there is a lot of things that are not sure. And I would also still say, we can discuss this for hours, but I would still say that if you're thinking about investing in Bitcoin or buying a Bitcoin, you can say, well, doesn't hurt to buy one Bitcoin. It might be worth $1 million in 20 years, so this is like my pension. But you can also say that you shouldn't. It's just the same as going to the casino, right? And putting it all on black. And to some extent, I actually agree that it is still kind of a casino money. But who knows? It might be the future currency that we will all use. And then, of course, the exchange rate of one Bitcoin will be huge. So the conclusion for today is pretty much that you actually don't need to understand Bitcoin. You don't need to spend 3 months like I did and reading up on Bitcoin and understanding it, because it's pretty basic, and you don't necessarily need to understand how your credit card works, how a mortgage loan works, how a bond default swap works, which all of your mortgage loans probably have, but it's not really part of your everyday life. It's the same with Bitcoin and blockchain. It will turn into something that is used, but you won't notice it. So it might say DKK, but the technology behind it will be Bitcoin and blockchain. And it can be used in all different kind of aspects. For example, imagine that you go to the hospital and you have your what's it called, all the papers with how many times you've been sick and everything, which is very, very personal information. Today, this is just laying on a computer in a file that can easily be hacked. But if you put this information into the blockchain, then it would never be able to. You would never be able to hack it, and it'd be much safer to transfer information through blockchain. And I think that's the most important takeaway, is actually that blockchain technology can be used in so many aspects of our everyday life, which will make it much safer, which will make it much more secure, so all your information is not laying around everywhere and people can use it. And I think that's what we're going to see in the future, is the blockchain being applied on a lot of everyday life information exchanges. So I don't know how much more time we have got, because I can, if you're interested, I could just show like 3 steps on how easy it is to actually buy Bitcoin. But I think we are on.
We have enough time.
Okay, cool. So how do you actually buy Bitcoin? Well, to buy Bitcoin, you need to download a wallet, a digital wallet, and that is really easy. You go into your app store and, for example, download Bread Wallet, create a profile, and then you would get these different words that you need to write down and never show to anyone, because if I had access to all these words for your wallet, I'll go in and I'll be able to steal all your Bitcoins. And also, don't throw it away, because the other day I just bought a new iPhone, and I went into my wallet, and it was totally empty, and I was like, fuck, where did I put this note? Right? Because this is the key to getting your open up your wallet and open up your Bitcoin account, really. Then you get a Bitcoin code or a wallet code, which is either a QR code or just some letters and some numbers. And then you go into a Bitcoin exchange. You could go into We Move Coins. I would love that. And just press buy, take your credit card, say how many Bitcoins you want to buy, and then say transfer it to your Bitcoin wallet, which you saw before, and then it will be transferred within 12 hours. So it's very, very easy. It takes maybe 5 minutes. It's not rocket science or anything. Cool. That was it.